Welcome to Life Stories, where we share heartfelt tales of love, resilience, and transformation. Today's story is about Jessica, a woman who faced heartbreak and betrayal but found strength in forgiveness and second chances. Through the struggles of abandonment, caring for a difficult mother-in-law, and raising a child alone, Jessica's journey is a powerful reminder that even in life's darkest moments, hope and love can prevail. Join us as we dive into this emotional and inspiring story. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's journey and stay connected for more incredible tales. My name is Jessica, and my life changed the day my husband, Michael, walked out of the door without looking back. He didn't just leave me, he left his mother, Helen, too. She was battling cancer, fragile and dependent. Yet he chose to abandon her in her greatest time of need. The cruelty of his decision still stings. But perhaps what hurt even more was the way he left, unapologetically, for another woman. Michael and I had once shared dreams of a future built on mutual love and support. I thought our bond was unshakable, especially during difficult times. But those hopes crumbled the moment he told me he had found someone else. He said it simply, as if it were an insignificant truth, and walked away, leaving me to pick up the pieces. Caring for Helen wasn't easy. Even before Michael left, she had always been a difficult woman, stern, demanding, and often unkind. Her words could cut deeper than she realized, and living with her felt like walking on eggshells. Yet, I stayed because I believed in doing the right thing, even when it wasn't reciprocated. After all, she was Michael's mother. And now, she had no one else. In the months that followed Michael's departure, I threw myself into the role of caregiver. Helen's condition had worsened, her once confident stride now depended on a cane, and the chemotherapy left her weak and irritable. I juggled her medical appointments, prepared her meals, and managed the house. But it wasn't just the physical strain that weighed me down, it was the emotional isolation. Helen rarely expressed gratitude. Instead, her remarks were laced with criticism. If I broke a plate while setting the table, she would lash out with sharp words about my carelessness. "Jessica, how can you be so clumsy? That was my favorite plate," she would say. Her eyes filled with disdain. Each comment felt like a dagger. But I swallowed my pride and endured it. I often found myself questioning my decision to stay. Why was I doing this for a woman who barely acknowledged my efforts? Why was I sacrificing my own happiness for someone who seemed to take joy in reminding me of my shortcomings? But deep down, I knew the answer, because it was the right thing to do. Helen was sick, vulnerable, and alone. And no matter how much her words hurt, I couldn't abandon her. There were moments when the weight of it all felt unbearable. I remember one evening vividly. I had spent the day cleaning the house, preparing meals, and running errands. Exhaustion clung to me like a heavy cloak. As I collapsed onto the couch, I glanced at the empty chair where Michael used to sit. The silence in the room was deafening, a stark reminder of how much had changed. Tears welled up in my eyes as I thought about the life I had envisioned for us, a life where we faced challenges together, supported each other, and grew stronger through adversity. Instead, I was alone, navigating a storm I hadn't asked for. But amidst the loneliness, I found small sources of strength. I often reflected on my parents, who had passed away when I was young. They had instilled in me the values of compassion and resilience. My mother used to say, "Love isn't always easy, Jessica. Sometimes, it's about showing up, even when it's hard." Those words became my anchor, reminding me why I continued to care for Helen despite her harshness. One evening, as I sat by Helen's bedside, I noticed her looking at an old photograph of Michael as a child. Her face softened, and for a brief moment, I saw a glimpse of the woman she might have been before life had hardened her. "You must think I'm a terrible person," she said quietly, her voice breaking the silence. The vulnerability in her tone caught me off guard. "I don't think that," I replied gently. I think you're someone who's been through a lot. She didn't respond. But her grip on the photograph tightened. It was a small moment. But it gave me hope, a flicker of light in the darkness. As the days turned into weeks, I began to realize that this experience was shaping me in ways I hadn't anticipated. It taught me the depth of my own strength and the importance of empathy. Even when it wasn't reciprocated, it reminded me that love is not always about grand gestures. Sometimes, it's about the quiet, unacknowledged sacrifices we make for others. Looking back, I see now that those months were a test, a crucible that forced me to confront my limits and redefine what it meant to love and to endure. It was a period of heartbreak and hardship, but also one of profound growth. Little did I know that the trials I faced with Helen were only the beginning. Life had more challenges in store, but it also held unexpected lessons and moments of redemption that would change everything. The day I discovered the truth about Michael was one I will never forget. I was in the middle of cleaning the kitchen when my phone rang. It was Lauren, my closest friend and one of the few people I could rely on during those lonely days. Her voice was trembling, carrying a mixture of urgency and sorrow. "Jessica, I need to talk to you," she said, skipping the usual pleasantries. "It's about Michael." At the mention of his name, my stomach churned. Since he left, I had tried to avoid thinking about him. But there he was, intruding on my thoughts once more. "What is it?" I asked, my voice tentative, bracing myself for what was to come. Lauren hesitated for a moment before continuing. "I saw him last night. He was with someone else. Another woman." Her words hit me like a thunderbolt. I felt the air leave my lungs as the truth sank in. Of course, I had known deep down. Michael hadn't left me out of some sudden existential crisis or misunderstanding. He had chosen someone else, someone who wasn't carrying the weight of his mother's illness or the responsibilities of their shared life. "Are you sure?" I whispered, though I didn't doubt her. "Yes, Jessica. I saw it with my own eyes," Lauren said softly. "I thought you deserved to know." I thanked her for telling me. But as soon as I hung up, the full weight of the betrayal crashed down on me. It wasn't just that Michael had left, it was that he had replaced me so easily, as though I were nothing more than a chapter he had decided to close. That evening, I confronted Helen with the news. I expected her to dismiss it or perhaps even defend him. But her reaction surprised me. For the first time since I had known her, she seemed genuinely distraught. "That boy," she muttered, shaking her head. "I didn't raise him to be like this." There was a vulnerability in her voice that I hadn't heard before. It was as though she, too, felt abandoned by Michael, though she would never admit it outright. Despite my anger and heartbreak, life went on. I still had to care for Helen, manage the house, and put on a brave face. But inside, I was unraveling. Each time I passed Michael's empty chair or saw his favorite coffee mug, a pang of grief hit me. One day, I caught myself staring at a photo of us from happier times. We were smiling, arms wrapped around each other, with the city skyline glowing behind us. It felt like a lifetime ago. I had believed in the man in that photo, trusted him to stand by me no matter what. But that man no longer existed. I decided to confront Michael, even if it meant reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. I called him and demanded he meet me. To my surprise, he agreed. We met at a small cafe, one we used to frequent in the early days of our relationship. When he walked in, he looked different, older, more worn, but his expression was the same as ever, detached, unreadable. "I know about her," I said, cutting straight to the point. Michael didn't deny it. Instead, he sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Jessica, I didn't want you to find out like this," he said. "But I can't pretend anymore. I'm with someone else. I'm happy with her." His words stung. But it was his tone that truly broke me. It was as though our years together meant nothing. As though I had been nothing more than a stepping stone to his new life. "I gave up everything for you, Michael. I said, my voice trembling with anger and pain. I took care of your mother. I stayed when things got hard. And this is how you repay me. Michael looked down at his hands, avoiding my gaze. I'm sorry, he muttered, though it was clear he wasn't. I couldn't do it anymore. Those words echoed in my mind long after he left the cafe. They weren't just an admission of his betrayal, they were a rejection of everything I had sacrificed. Everything I had endured. As I walked home that evening, the city lights blurred through the tears in my eyes. I felt a deep, gnawing emptiness. But amidst the pain, a flicker of resolve began to grow. Michael might have given up on me, but I wasn't going to give up on myself. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would test my strength, my patience, and my capacity to forgive. After Michael left, life at home with Helen grew even more difficult. Her health was deteriorating rapidly, and while I did my best to care for her, she remained as critical and demanding as ever. Each day felt like a battle to maintain my composure, but I clung to the belief that kindness and patience could overcome even the hardest of hearts. One evening, after another long day of managing the house and tending to Helen's needs, I stumbled upon something that would change everything. While cleaning Helen's room, I noticed her mattress slightly askew. Beneath it, I discovered stacks of neatly organized cash. Far more than I could have imagined. Shocked, I stood there for a moment, frozen by the realization. I couldn't understand it. We had been living modestly, even struggling at times, and yet Helen had been hiding this fortune all along. My mind raced with questions. Why would she keep this secret? What was she planning to do with all that money? When Helen returned to her room and saw me standing there, her eyes immediately narrowed. "What are you doing in my room?" she demanded, her voice sharp and accusing. "I found this," I said, gesturing toward the hidden cash. "Why? Helen, why would you keep this from me? From Michael? We struggled while you hid all this money." Her expression shifted, and for a moment, I saw something unexpected: guilt. She sank into her chair, her usual defiance replaced by an air of vulnerability. "I didn't want anyone to know," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "That money is a curse. It's not what you think." I sat down across from her, my anger giving way to curiosity. "What do you mean?" I asked. Helen sighed and began to share a story I never expected to hear. Her father, she explained, had been a wealthy but cruel man. He had amassed his fortune through ruthless means, and his wealth had come at the expense of others' suffering. When he passed, he left everything to Helen, but the inheritance felt like a burden rather than a blessing. For years, I refused to touch it, Helen admitted, her eyes filled with regret. "That money is tainted, Jessica. It reminds me of everything I hated about my father, about the life I tried to leave behind. But when Michael started to spiral, I thought maybe I could use it to help him pay off his debts, give him a fresh start. But then he left. And I didn't know what to do." Her words stunned me. Helen, the woman I had thought of as cold and unfeeling, was revealing a depth of pain and regret I had never imagined. For the first time, I saw her not as the bitter figure who criticized me at every turn, but as a woman shaped by her own struggles and wounds. "I know I've been hard on you," she continued, her voice softening. "Too hard. And I've made mistakes, more than I can count. But Jessica, you've stayed. You've cared for me when no one else would. And for that, I owe you more than I can ever repay." Her words brought tears to my eyes. I had spent so long resenting Helen for her harshness, never realizing the depth of her own pain. In that moment, I saw a glimmer of the person she might have been before life had hardened her, a woman capable of kindness, remorse, and even love. "I don't need repayment, Helen," I said, my voice trembling. "I just need to know that we can move forward, that we can find a way to live together without all this pain between us." Helen reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly firm. We can try, she said. Her voice filled with a sincerity I had never heard before. For what it's worth. Jessica. I'm sorry. For everything. That evening marked a turning point in our relationship. The walls Helen had built around herself began to crumble. And in their place, a fragile but genuine connection started to form. It wasn't easy. And it didn't happen overnight. But for the first time, I felt hope that we could build something resembling a family. Little did I know, life had even more surprises in store for us, some painful, some beautiful, and all of them transformative. Not long after Helen's heartfelt apology, life began to shift in unexpected ways. One morning, as I went about my usual chores, a strange wave of nausea overtook me. At first, I thought it was just exhaustion catching up. But the symptoms persisted. It wasn't until a week later, after yet another dizzy spell, that I began to suspect something more. Could I be pregnant? The thought filled me with a mix of hope and fear. I hadn't planned for this. And the timing couldn't have been worse. But deep down, the idea of a child, a piece of me, a symbol of new life, stirred something in my heart. I confided in Helen, unsure of how she might react. To my surprise, her eyes softened with something close to joy. A baby, she asked, her voice trembling. My grandchild? Her reaction caught me off guard. I had expected indifference or perhaps even disapproval. But instead, she seemed genuinely moved. Jessica, she said, reaching for my hand. This baby, it changes everything. It's a second chance, for me. For us. I want to help. In the weeks that followed, Helen became a different person. She was still frail and often needed care. But she began to take small steps toward independence. She insisted on accompanying me to doctor's appointments. And she even started sharing stories from her past, moments of joy and hope that I hadn't known existed. Her transformation gave me the strength to start rebuilding my own life. I knew I couldn't rely on Michael's support. And with a child on the way, I needed to secure a future for myself and the baby. That's when Lauren stepped in. Lauren had been my rock through the chaos of Michael's betrayal. One afternoon, over coffee, she shared an idea that would set me on a new path. Jessica, why don't you come work at the restaurant with me? It's not glamorous, but it's a start. You're hardworking, and I know you'll do great. The offer filled me with both excitement and apprehension. I hadn't worked outside the home in years, and the thought of starting over was daunting. But Lauren's encouragement and Helen's newfound support gave me the courage to take the leap. Working at the restaurant was tough at first. The long hours on my feet, the fast pace, and the steep learning curve were overwhelming. But it was also exhilarating. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was doing something for myself. I was earning my own money, meeting new people, and rediscovering a sense of purpose. Helen, meanwhile, continued to surprise me. One evening, as I returned home from work, I found her in the kitchen, trying to prepare dinner. She was shaky and slow, but the effort was genuine. I thought I'd help out, she said with a small smile. You've been doing so much. Jessica, it's the least I can do. Her gesture, though simple, brought tears to my eyes. This was the same woman who had once criticized my every move. And now she was standing in the kitchen, attempting to shoulder some of the burden. As the months passed, Helen and I found a rhythm, a fragile partnership built on mutual understanding and a shared desire to move forward. The baby became a symbol of hope for both of us. A reason to keep trying even when the days felt impossibly hard. One afternoon, Helen sat me down at the kitchen table. Her tone was serious, but her eyes were kind. Jessica, I've been thinking about the future, she said. I want to make sure you and this baby are taken care of. No matter what happens to me. She explained that she had decided to transfer all of her assets, her house, her savings, into my name. It's not just for you, she said, her voice trembling. It's for my grandchild. I want him or her to have a secure future, free from the mistakes I made with Michael. Her words left me speechless. This was the same woman who had once hidden her wealth out of fear and resentment. And now she was offering it freely, with love and trust. "Thank you, Helen," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to repay you." "You already have," she replied simply, "by staying, by forgiving, by giving me a second chance." As I lay in bed that night, feeling the gentle flutter of life within me, I realized that this journey, painful and challenging as it had been, was leading me to a place of healing and renewal. Helen and I were no longer just two people bound by circumstance, we were becoming a family. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful about what was to come. The day I opened my restaurant felt like a dream come true. It had taken months of hard work, planning, and saving. But standing in that bright, bustling space, I felt a deep sense of pride. This was more than just a business, it was a symbol of the life I had rebuilt for myself, for Helen, and for the baby I now held in my arms. The opening celebration was lively, filled with laughter and well-wishers. Lauren had been instrumental in helping me make this happen, and I had even hired her to work alongside me. Helen, now stronger than she had been in years, sat at a corner table with baby Noah on her lap, beaming with pride. As I greeted guests, thanking them for their support, the sound of the front door opening caught my attention. Turning toward it, my heart sank. Michael stood there, disheveled and clearly intoxicated, a shadow of the man I had once loved. The room fell silent as he stumbled forward, his voice loud and slurred. "Jessica," he called out, his tone a mix of anger and desperation. "So, this is what you've been doing? Using my mother's money to open this place?" His words stung, but I kept my composure. "Michael, you don't belong here," I said firmly. "Please leave." He ignored me, his gaze darting around the room as if searching for an audience. "This is my money, Jessica," he shouted. "Mom's money. And I want my share." I felt a surge of anger rise within me. "Your share," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "You abandoned us, Michael. You left your mother when she needed you most. You left me to care for her, to rebuild my life alone. You don't get to walk in here and make demands." Before Michael could respond, Helen's voice cut through the tension. "Enough, Michael," she said, standing up from her chair with Noah still in her arms. Her tone was calm but resolute, filled with a quiet strength that silenced the room. "You are my greatest disappointment," she continued, her gaze locked on her son. "Not just as a son, but as a man. You walked away from your responsibilities, from your family. And now you come here, demanding what isn't yours. Let me be clear, you will receive nothing from me. Not a cent, not a shred of my legacy. Everything I have belongs to Jessica and Noah now, because they have shown me what it means to love and to endure." Michael's face twisted with frustration and humiliation. But he didn't argue. He muttered something under his breath, turned on his heel, and staggered out the door. The room remained silent for a moment before the hum of conversation resumed. I stood there, processing what had just happened. Helen's words echoed in my mind, filling me with a mix of gratitude and sadness. She had defended me, not just as her caregiver, but as her family. Later that evening, as I cleaned up after the celebration, Helen approached me. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," she said softly. "I never wanted Michael to hurt you the way he has." I shook my head, smiling through the lingering tears in my eyes. "You don't have to apologize, Helen. What you said today, it meant everything to me." Helen placed a hand on my shoulder, her expression filled with both pride and sorrow. "You've become like a daughter to me, Jessica," she said. "And Noah, he's given me something I thought I'd lost forever, hope. A chance to make things right." As I held Noah close that night, I thought about all that had brought us to this moment. The pain, the betrayal, the struggles, they had all led to something greater, a bond forged through forgiveness and resilience. A family built on second chances. Michael's departure from our lives that evening was the final chapter in a painful story. But it was also the beginning of a new one. One filled with love, hope, and the promise of a brighter future. The years that followed were a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. Life settled into a rhythm. One that revolved around raising Noah, running the restaurant, and caring for Helen. Helen continued to surprise me with her transformation. The once critical woman who had made my life so difficult became a loving grandmother, pouring all her energy and affection into Noah. She would sit with him for hours, reading stories or watching him play, her laughter filling the house in a way I had never imagined. Noah adored her, too. He would run to her the moment he woke up, his little arms outstretched for a hug. "Grandma," he'd squeal, his voice filled with joy. Watching them together often brought tears to my eyes. It was as though Helen had been given a second chance to love, and she was making the most of it. The restaurant flourished, becoming a beloved part of the community. Lauren and I worked tirelessly to ensure its success. And with Helen's encouragement, I began to dream even bigger. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of stability and pride not just in what I had achieved, but in the life I was building for Noah. But even as things improved, Helen's health continued to decline. The cancer, though temporarily in remission, returned with a vengeance. We spent countless nights in hospitals, fighting to keep her comfortable and hopeful. Through it all, she remained strong, her spirit undiminished. One day, as I sat by her bedside, Helen reached for my hand. Her grip was weak, but her eyes were steady and full of emotion. "Jessica," she said softly, "I need to talk to you about something important." I nodded, my heart heavy. "Of course. Helen. What is it?" She took a deep breath, her voice trembling. "I've already told my lawyer. Everything I have, this house, my savings, even the restaurant, it's all yours and Noah's now. I want to ensure that you both are taken care of, no matter what happens to me." Her words brought tears to my eyes. "Helen, you don't have to do this," I said, my voice breaking. "You've already done so much for us." She shook her head, a faint smile on her lips. "This isn't just for you, Jessica. It's for Noah. He deserves a future filled with opportunity and love. And you've shown me what family truly means. You've given me more than I ever gave you." In the months that followed, we cherished every moment we had with Helen. She spent her final days surrounded by love, knowing she had left behind a legacy of kindness and redemption. When she passed, the grief was immense, but so was the gratitude. Helen had taught me that it was never too late to change, to love, and to make amends. Noah grew up hearing stories about his grandmother, the strong, stubborn woman who had found her way back to love. He adored her memory, often asking for her favorite stories and songs. As Noah grew older, he began writing. What started as small stories about our life together eventually became something more. He poured his heart into his work, capturing the struggles and triumphs of our family in a way that resonated deeply with others. His first book, a tribute to Helen and me, became an instant success, celebrated for its raw honesty and emotional depth. On the day of his book launch, I stood in the crowd, watching as he spoke to the audience. He talked about love, resilience, and the lessons he had learned from the two women who had shaped his life. His words were a reflection of everything we had endured and everything we had built together. After the event, he hugged me tightly. "Mom," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "Everything I am, everything I've achieved, it's because of you and Grandma. Thank you for teaching me what it means to love." Tears streamed down my face as I held him close. "Noah," I whispered, "you are the greatest gift I've ever been given. Your grandmother would be so proud of you." As I watched him sign books and greet fans, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey that had begun with heartbreak and betrayal had led to something extraordinary, a legacy of love, resilience, and hope that would carry on through Noah and his words. In the quiet moments that evening, as I sat by the window and watched the stars, I thought of Helen. I hoped she could see us, that she knew her love and sacrifices had not been in vain. I whispered a silent prayer of gratitude, knowing that her lessons would live on in Noah's heart and in mine. This was our story, a story of second chances, redemption, and the transformative power of love. And though it had been a long and difficult road, I wouldn't have changed a thing. In the end, life taught me that love and resilience can triumph over even the darkest of days. Helen's transformation and her unwavering support for Noah and me proved that it's never too late to change, to love, and to make amends. Noah grew into a remarkable young man. His stories a testament to the strength and beauty of family bonds, even those built through hardship. As I reflect on our journey, I feel immense gratitude for the challenges that shaped us and the love that carried us through. Helen's memory lives on in our hearts, inspiring us to embrace kindness, forgiveness, and hope. Thank you for joining me on this heartfelt journey. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Life Stories to discover more tales of love, redemption, and resilience. Stay tuned for more inspiring stories